Doctors and nurses of Reddit, have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? If so, what happened? I worked labor and delivery, had a very young mother come in, accompanied by her parents. She was just 12 to 13, and parents looked stuffy and kept telling her she should have had an abortion, she was too young, etc. Her mother was silent the whole time, but leaked tears for her constantly. While she labored, I received a call from a very young boy who said he was her boyfriend. His trembly voice explained that her father wouldn't come to the hospital. I explained that I couldn't give out information, but he could talk to her afterward. I went in, told her he had called, and she showed me a picture of him. He was white, straight red hair, pimply and tiny, the runt of the litter. About an hour later, her physical ed teacher stopped by to check on her, which I thought was odd. We didn't get many teachers checking in on students. He was as opposite of the boyfriend as he could get. Tall, very muscular, beautiful smile, and rich chocolate brown skin. The girl's father accompanied her to the delivery room. Odd, but okay. The more she pushed, the louder she cried. In between, she kept saying, "Sorry, Daddy." Finally, out slid a very beautiful chocolate brown baby boy. I thought her father was going to pass the heck out on my delivery room floor. I did my usual, "It's a boy," and said nothing else. I handed him off to a nursery nurse and got Dad a chair. The new mom said, "I'm sorry, Daddy," over and over again. Her mom, now frowned up, came to see the baby, took one look, started asking God for forgiveness, and left. I sent her dad home a short bit later, admonishing him to react at home, not here. I set up a time for our counselor to meet with him before I left. After talking to new mom, she admitted her gym teacher had been giving her special treatment. I explained sex to her, and she said she'd only kissed the BFF, but had stayed after school to be with her gym teacher. I'm state mandated to report child abuse, so I did. 2 weeks later, with her world shattered, her baby was given up for adoption. I wish her the best. Of note, this was 1989. My husband and I were visiting our friends who just had a baby. We are the godparents, and we were standing in the hallway talking to both sets of grandparents. Well, apparently the hospital has a rule that only 5 visitors may be present in the hallway, but the security guard had let all 6 of us in for some reason, and we didn't realize it. This nasty nurse comes up to us, notes that there are 6 of us, tells us someone will have to leave immediately, and then turns to my husband and says, "Oh, are you the daddy?" Without missing a beat, he says, "That's what we're all trying to figure out here." She gets a look of horror on her face and backs away. Worked in the Army hospital in Fort Lewis. A woman came in for belly pain, and we found out and told her she was 10 weeks pregnant. The husband at the bedside started laughing, grabbed his coat, and left the room explaining to us that he had been in Afghanistan until 3 weeks prior. He looked back at her and just said, "Well, that's that, Brittany." I always liked how classily he left her while she just silently stared off into space. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. This guy had 3 kids and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doctor opened up his sack and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding out that way. 23andMe posts a 25% off coupon 2 hours after this post goes up. Oh! One of my favorite cousins just did 23andMe with her dad and discovered that they were not biologically related at all. This is especially horrible because my aunt, her mother, is one of the most ridiculously zealous and judgmental people I've ever met. She screams at the baby cousins when they don't behave perfectly. She literally threw a pocket Bible at a woman in a grocery store after the woman was on the phone and said a curse word or something. And she likes to send me unsolicited long letters about God's plan for my life. Surprisingly, her husband is the most fun and laid-back person I've ever met. He did not deserve this or her. I learned about heteropaternal superfecundation from a friend of mine. She is a 5'0" blonde white girl introducing me to her 6'5" black twin. Surprises for everyone that day. Not in the hospital, but a friend and his girlfriend were on again, off again, and she got pregnant. She swears it's his. He wants a paternity test. He moves in with her and her mom. She has the baby. Take the test. Test is taking a while to come back. Him and his family are over the moon with the baby. Kind of forget about it. Mentions it to girlfriend's mom one day, and she says, "Oh yeah, didn't she tell you? Came back a while ago. Totally your baby. Awesome, all is well." A few months later, they're moving out, and he finds the test in a box. Not his baby. I used to work in the newborn nursery at a hospital. We got the babies right from delivery, cleaned them up, footprinted them, checked vitals, etc. Dads usually came in with the newborns. This dad comes in with this baby. Dad is white, mom is white, baby is very obviously not white. The dad was very quiet standing next to this baby, watching us clean it up. He says quietly, "I don't think this is my baby." You could tell he was absolutely devastated. We advised him not to sign the birth certificate until he was sure. Not sure what happened after we sent the baby back out to mom, but I felt awful for the guy. My best friend was dating a girl and knocked her up. They got engaged and planned to get married right after the baby was born. There were about 10 of us in the waiting room waiting for her to crank out the baby. It was essentially her parents, his were in another state, some of her friends, and some of ours. After sitting there for about 2 hours, he walks out with a smirk on his face and says, "Let's go." We all thought something horrible had happened. Her friends asked how the baby is, and he said, "Fine, but black." He motioned for us to go, so we followed him. In the parking garage, he tells us to follow him to his apartment, then sends me a text asking I could put him up for a while. We literally moved him out of his apartment and into my spare bedroom in like an hour tops. Her parents didn't know who to be mad at. The confusion on their faces when he told them the baby was black was priceless. I was blood typing a newborn once. Mom was an O positive, baby was AB positive, which is more or less not possible. I immediately panicked because Jesus God, they mixed up the babies. Someone has the wrong baby. We're gonna get sued. We're gonna have to genetic test the entire nursery. What if they subpoena me for being the idiot who discovered the problem? I don't have insurance. What if they sue me? After repeating the test 3 times, I called the floor and told them that they'd either drawn the wrong baby's blood or they'd switch the babies because mom couldn't be the baby's mother. No, it was a donor egg. The redraw matched fine. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Oh God, my heart though. I work in anesthesia. One of my colleagues had someone vaginally deliver a baby with Steve's lunchbox tattooed above the birth canal. The OBGYN said to the father after the delivery, "Congratulations, Steve." The guy replied that his name was indeed not Steve. Don't know if that counts. My wife is an RN/hospital supervisor. Code yellow is the code over the intercom for security or large male nurses needed. It rarely ever happens, but every now and then over the speakers you hear a code yellow, labor and delivery. You know the reason. I used to work with a guy whose wife was pregnant. Near time for delivery, everyone at her place of business had a big party with gifts, money, etc. So, big day comes, water breaks, they get in car to go to hospital. She breaks the news on the way there that it's not his, the kid is into the race, and if he could just drop her off at the hospital and then leave, that would be great. He took a few days off work, found a new apartment, moved out, filed divorce, etc. He called into work and told someone what happened. News spread pretty fast. All congratulations cards, etc. were cleaned up and thrown away. Everyone was very sensitive to his pain. Except, somehow, I don't know how, I did not get the news. So on his first day back, I walked into the office he shared with 6 other guys and said, Hey, Daddy-O, how's fatherhood so far? Getting any sleep? Got some pictures? Let's see the little tyke." He slowly lifted his head to look at me with a painful look. The room was dead silent. One of his workmates stood up, grabbed my arm, and walked me out of the room, shushing me. "What happened?" I asked. "Did it die? What's the problem?" When he told me, I about died myself. I still feel bad for the dude, and it's been 30 years. "Sorry, can we just talk about the fact that she said, by the way, this kid is not yours, and if you could just drop me off at the hospital and then leave, that'd be great. Like, you can't just drop that on someone like that." I worked with this guy a few years back. Him and his wife were pregnant. They were super excited and shared the news with everyone and put stuff all over social media. So fast forward a few months, and the kid is unfortunately stillborn. They had a professional photographer come to the hospital and they did a series of photos, holding the baby, dressing it up, kissing it on the head, usual newborn photos. The bizarre thing is they put them all on Facebook. I found it kind of morbid, but whatever. I've never lost a kid, so that's cool. One day at work, a guy from a different branch comes into the store and congratulates my coworker, slaps him on the back and says all this stereotypical new dad small talk BS. My coworker informs him the baby was born dead. The other guy refuses to believe it and keeps saying, "F you, man, quit messing with me. I saw the pictures on Facebook." They go back and forth and the guy finally realizes he's not being messed with. This was the most uncomfortable exchange I've ever seen between 2 humans. I'm not a nurse. My professor was a labor and delivery nurse, and she once saw a man running between 2 delivery rooms. Both women he had impregnated went into labor and gave birth the same day. Supposedly, the one he was married to was angry because the woman he cheated with was impregnated after the wife, but had her kid 10 minutes before the wife. Labor and delivery is apparently the most drama-filled section of hospitals. My significant other is planning to be a nurse, and he's going to work in labor and delivery neonatal this year, and I'm excited to hear any dramatic stories. My grandmother was a nurse. Once she was assisting with delivering a baby, and the ostensible father commented that the child looked good for a premature baby. Without thinking, my grandmother told the truth. That baby is not premature. So I guess I know where I get my social obliviousness from. A coworker's aunt just found out her dad wasn't actually her dad. So she was really big into genealogy and had mapped out her family tree as far as she could go. She took one of those ancestry DNA tests about 2 months ago, and her father's side didn't line up with what she was expecting. In fact, she didn't recognize a single name that she was matched with paternally. She casually asked her dad if he knew any of the names, and he recognized the surname of the maintenance man at the apartment complex where he and his wife, Aunt's mom, lived shortly after they had gotten married. Claimed he was a lousy repairman who always flirted with his wife, etc. Aunt's mom had passed away a few years ago, so she decided to not tell her dad the news. Had a lesbian couple come in. One of them was pregnant, neither knew. Judging from all the screaming, this information was poorly received. My brother was doing his OBGYN rotation. His story is that in the first birth he assisted, the woman had her husband leave the room. Seems odd these days, but he had the husband step out for the comfort of the patient. The baby is delivered and the color was not even close. Lily white parents and very black baby. She wants him to stay to talk to her husband who is about to come back, and he bails on the whole situation. She was playing the odds all the way to the end. Had a college buddy whose fiance was pregnant. They were the perfect couple. Both had just over a year with great careers starting out. Everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room. They're in there and out comes a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead, and she is a blonde, blue-eyed Texas girl. He made sure everyone was okay, waited for her parents to arrive, and left without saying a word. He moved all of his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital and cut off all communications with her, just walked out of their lives in the most stone-cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years, and he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times, but he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped about $10,000 in a wedding that never happened. My son came out and looked really tan. My ex-girlfriend and I are pretty white. I thought for a second she cheated on me. We are now separated for different reasons unrelated to her child, and he is pasty white as hell. Got one heck of a suntan in the uterus, though. Not a doctor, but a distant cousin of mine definitely has children that don't belong to the father. My cousin was adopted as an infant and was essentially a crack baby. She struggled with some developmental issues and has a low IQ compared to most, but she can still live on her own with little to no issues. She, a white woman, married a Latino guy, really dark brown skin, several years ago, and they had a son together who was dark hair, dark skin, and dark eyes. He is easily identified as their son. The real trouble happens years later. Her husband, who we'll call Javier, has some IQ issues of his own. Just a little slow when it comes to tasks and reasoning. Anyway, Javier is in the military and gets deployed internationally for about 6 months. When he comes home, his wife is 4 months pregnant. You do the math. He still believes the baby is his own, even after it's born with pale skin and blonde hair and blue eyes. If that wasn't bad enough, it happens again 2 years later with another baby. Same blonde hair and blue eyes. Everyone knows she slept with a different man. It was actually her high school boyfriend, but Javier still thinks the children are his. It's kind of sad, but at this point, there's not much you can do. He has raised the kids as his own. I'm a nurse, but this didn't happen to me. A friend of mine got pregnant in high school. She claimed it was our local doctor's son's kid, so he agreed to deliver his grandchild for free. Child delivered, and it was obviously half African American. Doctor's son and girl were both white. I think he still delivered it for free as he was relieved his 14-year-old son wasn't a dad. I'm too young to have witnessed it, but back in the late 50s or 1960, my uncle had an affair with a woman who later divorced her husband and became his wife. She had 2 children with her first husband, or at least that was the official story that everyone maintained. However, it was extremely obvious, based on appearance, that the second of my aunt's 2 children while married to her first husband was my uncle's biological child. She looked nothing like my aunt's first husband or her older half-brother, and exactly like my uncle. As the years went by, the pretense was dropped and was never mentioned again. Both my sons came out with barrel chests, red hair, and huge hands and feet, so they look exactly like me. My wife looks at them all loopy on drugs and says, "That's not my kid!" The whole room went silent for a minute, and then we bust out laughing. My wife has a wicked sense of humor. My sister got pregnant in high school and later met her now husband when she was 5 months pregnant. She is white and boyfriend is black. The baby daddy was white and not present. I was with our entire family, including my now brother-in-law, visiting the baby. My sister was still in recovery from her C-section. Brother-in-law picks up my niece. The nurse looks at him and says, "She should darken up in a few days." We all had a laugh. We knew he wasn't the father, but she didn't. I always wondered if she felt bad or assumed adultery. They have 2 more girls together and he was able to adopt 3 years later. Kinda happened to my mom. My biological father is Greek with very pale skin and my mom is a white Western European mutt. When I was born, I had very dark skin and a head full of thick black hair. He didn't seem concerned, but his mother freaked out, called my mother and grandmother not so nice names, and left. My father ended up splitting on us when I was about 3 weeks old with no explanation. A couple months later, my skin lightened, all of my black hair fell. Turns out he was the father. We've never tried to reach back out to his family because in that first year of my life, they went through a lot of drama, including arrests, rehab stays, drive-by shootings, an affair followed by a divorce, another baby mama my mother didn't know about, the list goes on. My father and I tried to form a relationship when I was in high school. It went okay at first, and then it got weird very quickly. He insisted I called him Dad, insisted on regular visitation, routinely showed up at my friends' and boyfriends' houses causing a scene, insisted I get family pictures with his new lady and his 5 other kids. None of us had the same mother, and this is not including the baby he had and ditched before we got together with my mom. I regret ever trying at all. He and his family were and still are trashy hot messes, and I'm glad my family decided to keep me away from them. Cherry on top, he was working for my now husband's parents when my husband and I first met. Once his parents found out who he was and what had happened, they fired him so I would never have to run into him at their business. He had it coming anyway, so they were glad to finally stop making excuses for him and let him go. I was doing epidurals in residency. This Caucasian couple was a more rural part of the country, and they don't look or sound particularly educated. Anyhow, wife is particularly antsy, asking when she can go home even though the baby isn't out yet. Husband looks bored and uninterested, like he's been there a whole bunch of times. I usually don't stay in the rooms during delivery, but this one I just happened to be nearby to give more in the epidural because of a tear immediately after delivery. Anyhow, when I got to the room, the wife is holding her eyes shut and doesn't want to see the baby. I look at the baby and he's obviously black. Now the husband is paying attention and he sees what I do. He keeps repeating, "When that baby gonna pink up," louder and louder. The OB tries to diffuse things by reminding everyone that this moment is critical and suggests the baby should be taken to the resuscitation area in the NICU and that the father should step out while the OB repaired the laceration. We called the social worker and security and I was called elsewhere, so I don't know what happened afterwards, so I can't imagine it was good. I worked as a lab tech before I became a nurse. We had a set of twins in the NICU that were super early and the mom was still in the OR getting sewed up from the cesarean. I was drawing baby B's blood when mom was wheeled over to baby A's isolette. She was crying and said, "Oh, thank God you're not black. I have been so worried the last 7 months." So newborn babies, especially when they're born early, are very pink, almost red. So even if the baby was part black, their skin isn't necessarily dark yet. But looking at these babies, it was obvious they were going to be black. The shape of the face, the texture of the hair, and baby B that I was working on had an intense Mongolian spot. A few weeks later, my NICU nurse friend told me that the babies were now on a no-info status, meaning security alert, can't give anyone information about them, can't refer them by name, etc. She said there was a huge fight because the mom's husband, white guy, obviously noticed that the babies were half black and that the mom cheated on him and got pregnant. The real dad, black guy, came in and didn't realize the mom was even married. These poor babies. I had a test done on my son when he was about 7 months old. Baby mama constantly told me he wasn't mine, but then came after me for child support. Got the test done and he was mine. So I hired a lawyer and we sat and chilled. 4 months later, she's arrested on charges of distribution of meth where my son lived, and he's been with me for the last 8 years. Now she pays me child support. Edit. I was remembering events wrong here. I got my kid when he was 11 months old after the Department of Homeland Security did a random stop drug test on her and she failed for meth. I then started a 2-year battle in juvenile court to not allow the state to reunify with the mother. I finally got juvenile court to release my case to district court, where we fought for actual custody. During our district court battle, she took my son for a visit, and I got a call from the cops in a city an hour away that she had been arrested on a domestic with her boyfriend at a hotel, and they searched her and found needles and meth paraphernalia. That was the last time she had him unsupervised. We went about 2 years of her barely calling, seeing him once a month for 10 to 20 minutes, until she finally got arrested on attempt to distribute meth charges. She got out on bail and was arrested for it again 3 weeks later. She spent 3 years in state prison and has been out about 8 months now. She appears to be clean and just gave me $100 for extra child support yesterday. She's only court appointed to pay $52 a month. So we're giving her a shot, but she is still and will remain on supervised visits for a long time. The whole fiasco has been such a blur, it's hard to remember exactly when, what, where happened, especially after 4 to 5 years of really not having to deal with her. At the time, it was utter crap though. She punched me a couple times, lied under oath, sent me threats, inappropriate photos of her with other men, the list goes on and on. I've really tried to put a lot of it behind me and forget about as much of it as I can to try and help me forgive her so she can at least be somewhat a part of my kid's life, because that's what he wants. I just watch her like a hawk now. I had the opposite happen, sort of. My wife and I are both brown-skinned, dark-haired, half-Mexicans, and our moms are both 100% white blondes with blue and green eyes. So we sort of knew it was a crapshoot with our baby, but the nurse who was assisting with delivery had no idea. At one point, she gets sort of nervous and calls for help, and another, I guess, more senior nurse came in and nodded and came over to talk to me. I thought there was something wrong with the baby as she comes over and stumbles through some questions. So I was father and no one else was coming, etc. Then finally, she awkwardly asks if either of us happened to be blonde growing up. I said, yeah, I was, and both the baby's grandparents are blonde as they come, and this wave of relief went over her as she brought me over to see this blonde as heck crowning baby head. It's funny because he looks just like me if you applied a Gringo Instagram filter. We often get awkward questions about his heritage, and my wife always hits them with, yeah, we're not sure if he's mine. It's always funny to see people nod for a moment and then go, wait, what? Not a medical professional, but I know of a related court case that made it to the state's highest court. Black guy and white woman are married. She is a former prostitute, and at some point they separate. He moves out of state, she moves out of state, and she goes back to prostituting. Guy gets a phone call around 9 months later from a friend or relative of his ex, saying that his ex is pregnant and ready to give birth any day now. Guy drives across the country so he could be there for the delivery. Baby comes out and is white, has blue eyes, and red hair. Mom says it must be a Trix baby. Seeing as the guy is black, he understandably pieces out. Later on, the mom's parental rights are terminated. As you can imagine from the prostituting, she was not a fit mother, and the state went about trying to find the dad to be notified before the kid could be adopted. Since the dude was still her husband at the time the child was born, legally he was the presumptive father. The state does genetic testing, and twist, turns out he is the father. For an extra kick in the pants, the state ends up terminating his parental rights for abandonment. Not a happy ending.